So, finally got around to making this staff video. Um, I've used it for a couple sieges. Uh, I've leveled it up to 20. I've used it in open world 1v1, so I've got a pretty good understanding of how it works. So, hopefully, this guide will help those interested in using staves. You can check out my life staff video that I posted earlier, and that'll help you if you want to be a complete magic user. And I would suggest for your third weapon to take straight sword with shield. You could also go with hatchet or warhammer or really anything else that you would want to go with. But I mainly take the straight sword for the passives in it, which give me more HP, healing, and just defensive stuff. So usually when you have double staffs on you, you don't want to be up close to people, but you can make it work. So but let's get into it. Like with the life staff video, I'll go over each ability, and then I'll talk about passives, and then I'll show you um, my builds for PvP open world and PvP sieges. So I don't have enough Azoth right now to completely respec everything, so bear with me. But as you see right here, this is pretty much what I use for everything, including sieges. But we'll start with Pillar of Fire. Pillar of Fire is a lot like Smite, except the circle's a little bit smaller than Smite. Um, this ability hits hard just like Smite, and on killing blows you get mana when you have the last perk in it. Um, so I definitely love taking this ability along with Incinerate. I use Pillar of Fire mostly as a way to engage before I use Incinerate. Or if somebody's attacking somebody else or getting attacked. If you're watching somebody getting stun locked by a hatchet or a sword, I'll usually put Pillar of Fire on top of that person getting stun locked so that it gives them enough time to get away while also doing damage to the enemy. Um, Same thing if one of my teammates is hitting an enemy, I could just plop that down and then focus somewhere else while that does damage. But it's a real quick, easy cast. Does a lot of damage. It's good for mob farming as well because of the AoE, though it's not as big as Smite, so just keep that in mind. Onto Siege of Fire. Now, this ability is very interesting because I want to use it and I feel like it should be good, but the cooldowns for the um, fireballs are just so long, and you have to stand still the entire time you're casting it. So it's about a 6-second cast time just to create the fireball, and then you fire it, and then it's another about 6 seconds to fire another one, and it takes up maybe about an eighth of my mana bar. So you can fire a couple of these before you have to regen your mana. What makes this ability so interesting is the last perk, Scorched Earth. Um, so in theory, you could technically take pretty much every single ability on here, except for these two. The only reason why I take this passive is because there's nothing else that I can really take. As you can see, it's pretty much just either go for abilities or go for this. So I just went for this for my build. But the last passive, Scorched Earth, creates a um, dot damage AoE that stays on the ground after the fireball is landed. Um, this could be super useful when taking points in sieges on attack or defending points on sieges during attack. You could put it in front of um, gates to create a dot damage attack that wards people away from attacking the door. It's very situational though. It does a lot of damage. I think when I was using it, I was hitting about 1300s, a little bit more than that. But that was a while ago, so I would assume it would hit more. But the problem with it is it's just so situational, and the explosion radius isn't that large. So um, It also does, I believe it knocks down with the flatten enemies to the ground. I haven't hit anybody directly with it, so that's something to test. But I don't necessarily use this ability that much because, moving on to the next ability, Meteor is just so good. Meteor Shower is the bread and butter of the Fire Staff. You max this thing out, and you are a huge threat during a siege. Um, Later today, we'll have a defense at one of our territories, and I'll demonstrate how powerful the Meteor Shower can be, especially if you get ahead of the curve. Um, it's insane how much damage you can do with this ability alone, just running around casting this. The main necessity to this ability is having Make It Rain. Doubling the radius of that Meteor Shower is massive. The radius already is fairly large, but doubling it makes it such a big ability that you will hit the majority of a raid in a fight, even if people are off to the sides fighting. As long as there's a group fighting, especially on a cap circle, you will hit pretty much the entire cap circle and a little bit outside of it. So this ability just does so much damage. It finishes people off. It's just hell raining from the sky. So it's a fantastic ability. I definitely recommend taking Meteor Shower first thing. It's great for mob grinding as well, if you can free cast it. Not really for solo mob grinding, so just keep that in mind. You'll need somebody else kiting mobs around, and then once he groups them up, then you'll be able to Meteor Shower and do tons of damage. The double cast distance makes that a lot easier as well. And the cast range is very far. Next is Flamethrower. I personally really don't like this ability. There's no situation where I'm going to be casting this in front of somebody, because you can get double range for it and you can get increased movement speed while casting it, but neither of these is good enough to justify using this ability. I've had guildmates say they've had success with it in sieges and mob grinding. I can see mob grinding. I can sort of see sieges only because you have a lot more people in front of you that you can use as shields while you're using it. But for me, it just doesn't do enough damage. I'm sitting there casting it, and I can't really do much while I'm casting it, when I could be casting a Meteor, and then when this is on cooldown, I could be casting Fire Pillar into Incinerate. So I've seen it used successfully, and I've heard people saying that they recommend using this along with the combination of Combust and Incinerate to get the stun, because when you stack 5 stacks of the Pyro debuff, they will get stunned for 5 seconds when you use Incinerate, which is a huge stun, especially a group stun, but it's getting that group together and not getting hit while using it, so just keep that in mind. But for mob grinding, especially if you're struggling tagging mobs in a group, I would definitely recommend using Flamethrower for that, at least. Next is Incinerate. Incinerate is probably the highest damaging ability in the Fire Staff trees, possibly even in all the trees. The only thing I can think of is maybe like Swordenboard Leap, or what is it called? It is, yeah, Leaping Strike. There's a Leaping Strike combo that does a ridiculous amount of damage, but Incinerate, I think, just for that ability alone, it's definitely my most damaging ability. So, but I've been able to hit upwards of 3,000 on people. I hit a dude for 4,000 last night during a siege. This ability does a ridiculous amount of damage, and what happens is, I believe when you double the radius of it, it's almost like it hits twice, because I'll see 2 damaging numbers, and I'll show you during the siege as well, and I'll point it out, but it seems to hit people twice. It also does a knockback, which is huge, especially in a fight. If you can get in the middle of people fighting and use this ability, all those people around you will probably die very quickly. If you don't kill them, then your teammates will kill them just because of the knockback. So That's why I use this ability while my meteor's on cooldown. So when my meteor's on cooldown, I'm looking around for groups to run in the middle. If I need to, I'll use Pillar of Fire to save somebody, and then I'll Incinerate. And it just does a huge AoE around it. It's a great ability. Um, I I've thought about using Combust, but I just can't put enough points in there to justify. Like, I would have to take out some important points here, like Advanced Sorcery or Summoner's Gift, just to get enough points in here. Because you need 10 points plus this. You need 11 in this tree, and I only have 8. So I would need to take out these 2 and then one of these. And I just recommend having the cooldown reduction and the overall mana pool. If you are interested in taking Combust, I would probably take out the extra mana pool, because, I mean, you're going to have mana issues anyway. 10% doesn't change too much, but I just like having the 10% because, you know, any mana that I can get is important for casting Meteor on cooldown. Like, you want to constantly be casting Meteor and making sure that you can free cast it, not getting attacked. Because this ability does a ridiculous amount of damage during sieges, especially since it's such a big AoE. You'll be hitting so many people so much. So finally we have Burnout. Burnout, a lot of people don't use this. A lot of people don't know how to use this. A lot of people think that you use it as a getaway. It's not necessarily a getaway. This is a, in my opinion, strictly PvE ability. So what it does is it launches you forward similarly to Speed of Light in the Life Staff tree, except it's much slower. It's not like an instant cast. It's much slower, and you glide across the ground, leaving trails of fire behind you. Now, those trails of fire do a considerable amount of damage to mobs. So if you were solo farming, this is really good at getting some damage on mobs. If you're farming in a group and you're the one kiting, it's a good idea to take this and do a little bit of damage. But I would say this is probably better used in solo grinding. There's certain spots on the map where you can group up a large amount of mobs, use this ability to good effect, and wipe the mobs with just Burnout and Incinerate, honestly. You can also throw in Pillar of Fire as a third ability if you wanted to. So, Flash Fire increases the range of it. It's a good idea to take that just to get extra damage on things. So if you're interested in PvE farming, I would suggest taking Burnout. So those are the abilities in the fire tree. We'll go over some of the important passives. First, the cooldown reduction and Flame Summoner, as well as the increased mana pool. I think those are probably the most important starting passives to get. So when you're just leveling up the tree normally, I would definitely suggest getting these. Next would be in Pyromancy. You have a choice between increased armor by 5% or slows enemies that have 3 or more stacks of fire. I would suggest the fire. Just because 5% armor is not super huge, and I would suggest most mages should be running either medium gear or heavy gear. Light gear is something to think about, and I might do a gearing up video at some point just to talk about what you should be thinking about in terms of gear and mainly rolling. Light rolls are something that I don't see that many people using, but it could be something that would fit your playstyle perfectly. I do med roll just for that extra escapability, because the slow roll is just not, it doesn't give me enough space. So I use med roll, but when I usually run like healer or when I'm doing PvE or something like that, or smaller group PvP, I'll take heavy armor just for the extra survivability and the extra HP. So I might do a video on that later, but for now, just know that the physical armor passive isn't necessarily like a game changer. So I would suggest just taking this slow. That would help you get away more. And then if you have heavy armor, that this will be even more helpful just so that you can get more space in between you and your enemy. So then next would be, if you were taking passives and not taking these trees, you would just take Pyromania. You never want to be below 25% HP, so this ability doesn't really matter that much. It's just something to get to Incinerate if that's what you wanted to go for. But if you wanted to take Flamethrower, you could literally take all these up to these 2 passes up here. So you have Trial by Fire, which deals fire damage passively to nearby enemies in a 4-meter radius. Lasts for 20 seconds and has a 2-minute cooldown. This ability is actually really nice. A lot of times when you have fights, this will just proc. Like it'll just start proccing. And because it lasts for 20 seconds and only has a 2-minute cooldown, you'll be proccing it a lot. Basically, when it procs, you'll see yourself kind of catch on fire a little bit. And then anybody around you that gets close to you, you'll just start burning them. It doesn't do a ridiculous amount of damage, does a little bit less damage than Flamethrower, but it's damage nonetheless. So it's just nice to have in any situation, honestly. But the one I would suggest more is the increased fire damage for you and your group members by 10 meters, by 10%. This is just good for your damage as well as the people around you. And when you're during a siege, when you're in the back with other mages, that just helps them out as well. And then just going over this passive really quick. This increases the range of heavy attacks, and getting this one increases the speed as well as setting enemies on fire that you use with the heavy attack. I honestly never even light attack, let alone heavy attack, with the fire staff because it uses mana. If it didn't use mana, I would definitely suggest looking into this. Honestly, I would be rethinking about how I do this entire build, but since we don't have that, which I feel like we should have light attacks not use mana, only because other physical damaging abilities don't need to worry about mana. Either they use stamina or they just don't use anything at all. So there's something to think about. I feel like Amazon needs to rebalance some of the things in their trees, but we'll just have to wait and see. So for now, this is just something that I took just because I had no other points to put in anywhere else. I wasn't going to take an ability or anything like that just for 1 point. So, but that's what this passive does. It's nothing crazy. It's something to think about. If you chase a lot of people and you use the fire staff exclusively, then you could try it out. I definitely suggest testing abilities, finding out what works for you, rewatching this video if you need to, just to figure out, like, alright, what ability works for me. Do I focus more on PvP grinding solo groups? Do I do open world PvP at like small groups from like 3 to 5, or do I go a little bit larger, maybe like 5 to 10? Do we fight that often? Are we going to PvP missions? How often do I do sieges? So, but real quick, here's my just overall PvP siege build that I use. Like I said earlier, I use Meteor Shower off cooldown, and then when that's off cooldown, I'm looking for groups to use Pillar of Fire and Incinerate on, just to run into the middle. I'll use Pillar of Fire if somebody's getting attacked or if somebody's attacking somebody, just because it's an easy shot. Because it's very predictable if somebody's getting stun locked or where they're going to be going. And for PvE, I would suggest honestly taking the same thing. You could switch out Meteor Shower if you're not in a group. If you're solo, you could switch that out for Burnout. And honestly, just having Pillar of Fire into Incinerate while you're using Burnout to do dot damage on mobs is very good. In groups, I'd probably go with these 3, honestly. I would take Flamethrower if you're struggling with getting tags, or if you're fine with getting tags, then you can go Meteor Shower. Take Incinerate if you want to get up and close, or you can just take these 2, and then Burnout if you're kiting mobs, or if not, just take Incinerate or Pillar of Fire, whichever you prefer. Pillar of Fire and Incinerate are kind of the same thing. Incinerate's a much larger and much higher damage ability, but just think of Pillar of Fire as a long distance Incinerate. So, or Smite if you're used to using that in the Life Staff tree. So that's it. that's it for the guides, at least for now. If anybody wants me to go over any other guides, I can get some of my guildies to possibly make a guide on like sword and board or hatchet or hammer. Hammer would probably be what we'd want to do next, but I would let one of my guildies take over for that because they have more knowledge on that. Hopefully later today I'll be putting up a siege video. It'll be a defense, so hopefully we'll get a lot of footage for that, and it won't end early because it forces the attackers to be in that siege with us for a half an hour, and we've been absolutely dominating sieges, so that'll be it for now. I might also release a kind of a sneaky arena video later as well, so just keep a lookout for that. So that's about it. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.